We need to talk about the Sony A1 Mark II because there's been a lot of hoopla about it on the internet. Well, I was lucky enough to take the camera around New York City for 2 days to test it out, and I wanted to give you my honest, unfiltered thoughts about this camera, which I think I can do since I've been shooting with the A1 Mark II every day for the last 3 years. That's because, in a way, the A1 Mark II is almost identical to the original A1. Now, the A1 Mark II does improve upon the original in some major ways, and it fixes almost every complaint that I've ever had about the A1. But I do think there's some reason for folks to feel a little bit underwhelmed because what should have been an exciting new camera doesn't really feel that way. So let's get into it. So a quick disclaimer, Sony did fly me out to New York for the launch of the A1, but they never do so with any expectations. They don't ask me to post anything, they have never told me what I can and cannot say, and they don't get to see this video before you do. They just know that I like cameras, and they're just like, here's this new camera to go play with, let us know what you think. So here's what I think. As I mentioned off the top, I've been an A1 owner since the first day that it was announced. For me, it was the closest thing to the perfect hybrid camera on the market. For a long time, I was very, very happy with it. And then, as Sony is one to do, they began releasing newer, cheaper cameras that had a bunch of improvements that made my A1 feel left behind. To me, the most important improvements were the improved flippy dippy screen, the AI autofocus, and then the improved ergonomics, especially on the A9 III. So when I heard rumblings that an A1 Mark II was set to be announced, I said, if those three things are in there, that's honestly all I need to be sold. And the good news is that the A1 Mark II does all of those things and then some. The flippy dippy screen is literally the best screen design ever on a camera, and it makes everyone happy, from vloggers to diehards to low-angle shooters to vertical Instagrammers. The ergonomics from the A9 III have also come to the A1 II, and honestly, it's kind of hard to describe how good this thing feels in the hand over a video like this. If you haven't already, I highly suggest just going to your local camera store and just holding either the A9 III or this camera, and you'll realize that this is what a camera should feel like in the hand. And then there's the AI autofocus, which is made possible by the inclusion of the AI chip. I know a lot of folks have been upset that Sony hasn't updated the A1 firmware to improve the autofocus to catch up with the cheaper cameras. Well, that AI chip is the reason, because that's what makes it able to do all of those crazy fast autofocus thingies. I've tested lots of cameras over the years, and this is easily the best autofocus by a pretty decent margin. They did also have one minor upgrade compared to the other Sony cameras, in that now it has auto subject detection rather than you needing to switch between person or car or insect or animal or things like that. I admittedly only was really testing it in the real world, switching between cars and people, which is what I would do most anyways. But I did also try it on a fake bird that they had in the creative space. That was cool. It worked well. So great. We love that this is in there. There's also another major improvement that I didn't have on my must-have list, but I'm actually very impressed with, and that's the image stabilization. The A1 II is now rated for 8.5 stops of IBIS compared to, I think, 5 on the original A1. And I'm always a bit dubious of how they get these numbers and ratings, but I can say that on a practical level, I was able to shoot handheld at 1/13 of a second at 50 mil, and it was tack sharp. And as someone who is constantly over caffeinated, that's a pretty big win for me. But I think the real wow moment for me was using the new dynamic active stabilization in video mode. I was able to get near gimbal level stabilization, even with a pretty mediocre ninja walk. This obviously does crop in quite a bit, and I still don't think that it truly replaces a gimbal if you're doing things like, just a proper video production, or you're doing events or weddings or things like that. But if you're doing run and gun work and you need just a couple of push in or slider shots or things like that, then I think this is going to be a huge added benefit. There are a few other stabilization related qualms that I do still have, which I'll talk about in a bit, however. Now, as exciting as it is that all these bigger things were added to the A1 II, the issue that I have, and where I think a lot of people are kind of having this backlash online and in the comments, is that there isn't really anything that's truly new. The 50 megapixel sensor is the same that we had on the original. The EVF is the same. The 30 frames per second high-speed shooting on photo mode is the same. The video specs are the same. So you still have the 4K 10-bit up to 120 frames per second and 8K up to 30 frames per second. So that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say that I've already been shooting with this camera for 3 years, because the image that you get out of it is effectively the same as what we had on the original.
Do they look different?
They look completely different. I don't know how they do it.
We're basically just getting all of the best and new stuff from the last few years, and we're adding it to what was already kind of a combination of really good image quality, speed, and hybrid versatility. And in that respect, I do get why some folks are underwhelmed that we're being asked to buy a new camera that's kind of the same. But I've also never once had a complaint about the image quality on the A1 on either the photo or video side. So is it really justified to complain that we are getting something that's really good and now it's just a lot better? So if we just add those 3 big things, is that alone worth that upgrade cost? For me, I think so. But if you're still upset about it, the good news is you can get that same image quality a lot cheaper by just getting the original Alpha 1. Used prices have dropped considerably since this announcement, and Sony are also having a holiday sale of like $1,000 off if you still want to buy a new one. Or if you're in the mood for treating yourself a little bit more this holiday season, my favorite VFX and graphics plugin, Motion VFX, is also having a huge Black Weeks sale now until December 4th. If you're a fan of this channel, you know that I've been using Motion VFX for ages for all of my animated texts, callouts, graphics, and I'm personally very hyped about their big sale. If you're a Resolve user like myself, or if you're still an Adobe kind of cat, you can get 30% off all of the plugins by using the code BW30 at the link in the description. My personal favorites are the M Tutorial and M Callouts plugins, but there's a ton of other stuff to choose from. Or if you're a Final Cut editor, you can also get 30% off the price of their Cine or Design Studio, and you just lock in that price, which is a sweet deal. So head over to the link in the description and use that promo code BW30 for 30% off. And a huge thank you as always to Motion VFX for sponsoring today's video. All right, so in addition to this, the sensor being the same, there's also a few things that we've either been asking for a while or that other brands have offered that the Alpha 1 II is still missing. For me, as both someone who's getting more into anamorphic and also does a lot of work that's posted to vertical social media platforms, the biggest one that we still don't have is OpenGate. For those not aware, this would allow you to record video using the full height of the sensor rather than just being limited to 16:9. Not only does this make it easier to crop a vertical frame from a horizontal video, but it also gives us better access to CinemaScope 239:1 aspect ratio when using anamorphic lenses. Speaking of, I'm pretty peeved that we don't have in-camera anamorphic D-squeeze on the Alpha 1 II either. I get that this is more of a cinema camera feature, but this is supposed to be a do-everything hybrid camera, and we already have this on the FX3, so I see no reason for leaving it out. And I also don't see why we need to wait until September to get 1.5x D-squeeze on the FX3 either, but that is a topic for another video. I think there was also some hope that because the A9 III introduced global shutter, maybe we'd get global shutter on the Alpha 1 II as well. Sadly, this is not the case, and it was a big ask, so maybe we can keep holding out hope for this to come to the next cinema camera, wherever that may be down the line. That would probably be more exciting anyways. Now, one thing that I don't think was that big of an ask is to include all of this fun stabilization stuff into all of the video modes. I know I spoke highly of the image stabilization improvements a bit ago, but sadly, both the active stabilization and the new dynamic active stabilization are only available in 4K up to 60 frames per second. And in 8K, you don't get any dynamic active stabilization whatsoever, which makes sense given its cropping and reframing, and it just makes it difficult to do since you're cropping from an 8K frame. But I would really just like to see, let's have dynamic active stabilization in 4K 120. Imagine how smooth and slow-mo, that would just be awesome. I want that. And then I think one of the more disappointing things with respect to getting the same sensor is that there's been no upgrade to the 8K. We're still limited to 8K up to 30 frames per second, and we don't have any form of internal RAW recording either. Personally, I'm rarely filming in 8K, and I usually don't want to deal with the file sizes that come with recording in RAW, but it's hard not to feel let down when you're paying $6,500 for the Alpha 1 II when other flagships out there, and even lower than flagships, are offering 6K 60 or 8K 60 and internal RAW recording for a much lower price point. So like taking a step back for a second, I think maybe where some of this underwhelming feeling comes from myself and definitely lots of others online is that this camera isn't really all that exciting. It simply has everything we've come to expect from Sony and puts it into one nice new package. It's kind of like the Sony lenses over the last few years. When a G Master is announced, you pretty much know what you're gonna get with it. The same thing happened with me with this Alpha 1 II, right? I heard the rumor and I said, I hope it has X, Y, and Z and that'll make me happy. So like, why are we upset when they give us X, Y, and Z and suddenly we're not happy? So I guess all of this is to say is that Sony has consistently met expectations with the Alpha 1 II, which is difficult given that they had previously far exceeded them with the original Alpha 1 and the A9 III. They've gone from making something exciting to making something exactly as expected. But the truth is, the Alpha 1 was arguably already one of the best cameras available. So while commenters might be upset about it, making it better in all the ways that pros care about is all they need. I know from just like the vibes around the internet that people are underwhelmed, but talking with multiple folks who work at camera shops, the Alpha 1 II pre-orders are through the roof, which is probably an important thing to remember. Sony identifies a user segment and then makes a camera to fit their needs. If you're upset about this camera, it means that it probably wasn't made for you. And that's totally okay. I personally have already put in my pre-order because for me, like I mentioned, this is exactly what I'm looking for to pair with my FX3. And if this camera isn't for you, that's fine. All modern cameras are great these days. There's plenty of cameras out there, Sony or otherwise, that will suit your needs. But if you're considering purchasing one as well, I think we also have to accept the fact that if history is any indication, it is a high likelihood that something new and exciting will likely come to Sony in the not too distant future. It will probably do so on a cheaper camera and will make you feel sad that you're holding a flagship that was more expensive that doesn't have that thing. So you just need to be okay with the Alpha 1 II as is. Now there's also a ton of other things about this camera that for the sake of time, I'm not gonna mention today. And I will be doing a deeper dive in the Alpha 1 II once I get my copy. So be sure to subscribe to see that one. And until then, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.